Time now for Morning Rounds. Joining us are CBS News Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. John LaPook and CBS News contributor Dr. Holly Phillips. First up this week, an update on a CBS News investigation into drug companies accused of boosting their profits at the expense of patients. John?
Anthony, it's a way of steering patients away from cheaper generic drugs. This week, New York State sued the makers of the Alzheimer's drug Namenda, accusing the company of violating antitrust laws.
This is my Namenda.
Mike Hitch is 54, has early onset dementia, and takes the Alzheimer's medication Namenda IR twice a day.
This is the 12-hour deal 7A, 7P.
The drug is due to go generic next year. But before that less expensive generic product becomes available, Namenda IR is scheduled to be withdrawn from the market. Instead, doctors are being asked to transition patients to Namenda XR, a once-daily pill which has additional patent protection and is unlikely to go generic for years. It's a strategy called forced switch.
I may have dementia and Alzheimer's and all that, but they're going to make millions, billions of dollars off of it and get everybody switched to their XR version before they can even get hold of a generic.
Namenda generates about $1.5 billion in annual sales. So loss of patent protection could translate to more than $1 billion in lost revenue in a single year. The lawsuit seeks to block Namenda's maker, Forest Laboratories, and its parent company, Actavis, from withdrawing the drug, calling this strategy illegal and charging forced switch is an effort to game the regulatory system and manipulate patients and physicians through business practices that impede competition from cheaper generic drugs and perpetuate defendants' monopoly profits. Eric Schneiderman is the New York State Attorney General.
This is hundreds of millions of dollars that will either be paid by Alzheimer's patients or by all of us, because 70% of these patients rely on Medicare or Medicaid.
We reached out to Actavis. The company said it does not comment on pending litigation. CEO Brent Saunders discussed Namenda during a Forest Laboratories conference call in January. We obtained a recording of the call.
We believe that by potentially doing a forced switch, we will hold on to a large share of our base users.
He also addressed the challenges generic companies face following a forced switch.
It's very difficult for the generics then to reverse commute back, at least with the existing RXs. They don't have a sales force, they don't have the capabilities, and is a obstacle that will allow us to, I think, again, go into a slow decline versus a complete cliff.
John, what happens when these generic companies do compete?
When these generic companies compete, the price of a drug can drop 70 to 80%. And what Attorney General Schneiderman is saying is these kind of tactics threaten access to a cheaper medication for an especially vulnerable population. These people have Alzheimer's, they have dementia.
Also this week, a new warning on popular so-called low-T treatments for men. An FDA panel voted Wednesday to tighten regulations of testosterone supplements, a multi-billion-dollar industry. The advisors say testosterone should not be prescribed to treat normal signs of aging. It may even pose health risks. So what exactly did the FDA say?
You know, ultimately, Vanita, testosterone therapy was developed for people who have serious medical conditions, right? And maybe their pituitary isn't signaling the body to make enough testosterone. In the last decade, it's started to be used for anti-aging purposes, and it's been really marketed aggressively. You know, any sports program you watch, you see a lot of commercials, touting the benefits of testosterone to reverse symptoms of aging. But the bottom line is there's not a lot of data to show that that actually works, that it does have anti-aging properties, or that it even works well for symptoms. But there is some data to show that it can cause side effects, things like heart problems, blood clots, or it can increase your cholesterol. So I think the FDA really wants to put some tighter regulations on how it's being used.
John, this is a blockbuster drug, $2 billion in sales a year. So how did a drug that's supposed to help men get to this point?
Well, it's supposed to help them, right? But who among us does not have fatigue? And so many of my patients come in and they talk, especially as they're getting older, about being tired, their libido is down. A lot of the things that are just part of normal aging or of not getting enough sleep or about life in the big city, but there's this magic medicine. And isn't it easier to take a medication than to try to get more sleep, try to calm down, try to spend more time on vacation? It's easier to just take a medication.
The flu season is coming up fast, and the CDC is making new recommendations. For the first time, health officials say kids from 2 to 8 years old should get a so-called ouchless vaccine, a flu nasal spray. They're also telling grown-ups to get their shots. Despite all the warnings, only 1/3 of adults between 18 and 64 got the vaccine last year. That compares to 70% of children under 5 and 65% of seniors.
New research finds using artificial sweeteners could backfire. Instead of helping you stay healthy, they could put you at risk for diabetes. The journal Nature suggests that long-term use of artificial sweeteners may actually increase rather than decrease glucose intolerance. They could also be a major contributor to obesity. This one's a hard one for me. I keep trying to get off unnatural sweeteners.
There's no free lunch, no calorie-free lunch. This is the latest in these stories about the gut microbiome, these trillions of bacteria that are in there. We thought they're just there hanging out, right? And we want to flush them out. No, not so much. They're actually doing stuff. They're making vitamins. We spoke a couple of weeks ago about how there's a gut-mind connection. We think it's important in obesity, perhaps heart disease and autoimmune disease. And now this latest, they took these artificial sweeteners and they gave them to mice. And they found that it changed their gut composition in a way that increased the likelihood that they would develop what's called glucose intolerance, which is really something that's felt to be on the step to possibly developing diabetes. Now, these were mice. They also went on in 7 people, humans, to try to test it and had a similar effect. But mice study, it's early, small number of people, but very interesting.
Still, is this surprising, Holly?
You know, I think the mechanism by which, it can harm us is a little surprising. I thought that the, bacteria in our intestines, that was all interesting to me. But ultimately, no. I don't think it's surprising to find out that artificial sweeteners are bad for us. We know that basically all chemical foods are bad for us. And it's not just how many calories we take in, it's where those calories come from. So ultimately, there's no shortcuts, just as John said. It's about eating real food, exercising, and the artificial sweeteners aren't going to help.
And it's fascinating to think we have to not only worry about what we're feeding ourselves, but what we're feeding our bacteria, how that might affect us.
Well, speaking of losing the battle of the bulge, finally, Americans need bigger belts. A study out this week says that in just over a decade, the average man's waistline has expanded from nearly 39 inches to nearly 40 inches. Women gained nearly 2 inches. Their average waistline has grown from about 36 inches to 38. The waist is the most dangerous place to carry fat because it's linked to heart disease.
I find this so interesting because even, in groups of people who remained the same weight, the distribution of that weight was different. People are carrying it more around the middle.
And this represents a real sea change for us over the last 10, not just what you see. You're seeing this muffin top, the added waist, belly fat that's there. And people used to think, well, that's just a cosmetic thing. Your cholesterol's okay, your blood pressure's okay. And now we're thinking, no. It actually can increase the risk of cancer, of heart disease, of stroke. So we really have to educate our patients. It's not just a cosmetic problem.
Dr. John LaPook, Dr. Holly Phillips, thank you both so much.